and measures, including what we'll be talking about here on the broadcast this afternoon, as we as well keep an eye on the live events which are unfolding across the country, majorly in the counties of Nairobi and in Nakuru, as well as Mombasa and Kisumu counties, where we will be watching with keen interest what will be happening as the protesters come to the streets demanding some reforms from the government. But we'll be talking about the concessions that the Kenya Kwanza administration had made following the protests that had engulfed the country, and the unrest that also followed the events between largely 18th of June and the 25th, which had prompted the government to walk back on some of the major policies that it had announced, including how parliamentarians have been put under sharp focus in what the protesters had said is the shocking institutional failure of a parliament in undertaking its mandate, rather warming up to the executive and largely State House, where they said was the main problem, lacking the representation part, and now talk of recalling some members of parliament following the pattern of voting at the National Assembly in effect to the now withdrawn Finance Bill 2024, which the President, after meeting the Kenya Kwanza Parliamentary Group at State House on the 26th of June last month, said that his administration will withdraw the Finance Bill, and which came to as a relief as to many Kenyans and those who have been protesting, but rather the government saying that this will have consequences across board in terms of budget cuts. But the protesters are not stopping at that. They are calling for further reforms within government, saying the lacking element of good governance and constitutionalism is now their next point of attention. And they are also calling for an end to corruption, injustice and inequality. The deaths, of course, notwithstanding the numbers documented by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights that the government through the Ministry of Interior and National Administration had denied, giving different accounts of Kenyans who are felled by police bullets in the aftermath of the protests that have happened across the country. And with me in the studio shortly to take his account is Kevin Osido, who is from the County Governance Watch, and which is also another frontier for the protesters now demanding for more accountability from county governments across the 47 devolved units, saying that what's happening at the national level ought to be devolved as well to the counties, saying that the governors are as well their point of attention, adequately so, saying that the money channeled by the exchequer to the devolved units need to be accounted, and saying that the malfeasance and the embezzlement at the counties, as per the reports issued by the Controller of Budget and the Office of the Auditor General, are also wanting, and this need for as well good governance from the county governments across the devolved units in the 47 counties. So the live pictures coming to you live here on Citizen Television are from Nairobi Central Business District. This is Kimathi Street, where police are keeping an eye on the protesters who had since morning been trying to access the center of the business district from different fronts, including also on Moi Avenue and Kenyatta Avenues. Emmanuel Toa, our reporter, has been keeping an eye and scanning through the streets of Nairobi, and to give us an account, he will be with us here shortly on the broadcast as we proceed with this discussion here on the broadcast this afternoon. And the live coverage is coming to you live from the counties of Nairobi, Nakuru, Mombasa and in Kisumu. And yesterday, in a sudden turn of events, the president pointed out foreigners funding the protest, saying that the Ford Foundation, which is an American organization based at the Ford Foundation, is the cause behind all the protests, saying that our youth are not available for retrogressive assignments. Those sponsoring them to cause the violence and mayhem must be ashamed of themselves, said the head of state in Nakuru County. He said, we asked the Ford Foundation to explain to Kenyans its role in the recent protests. If they are not interested in democracy in Kenya, they should either style up or ship out. We will call out all those who are hell-bent, according to the president, on rolling back our hard-won democratic gains. He spoke in Nakuru County yesterday, further saying Kenya is a democratic country governed by the rule of law and run by democratically elected leaders, and all we want is peace. We cannot run our country through anarchy and revolution. According to the head of state, we will ensure, he said, that whosoever is sponsoring the protest is met with the full force of the law, further condemning what he claimed were influencing the youth to cause violence, mayhem and anarchy in the country. But the government has not been or has been unable to come clear on the number of Kenyans who were killed. According to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the number that the organization had provided, which is taxpayer funded, is indistinct with the assertions or the accounts given by the government of the number of demonstrators who are felled or who were killed by police. It is also a matter that the Independent Policing and Oversight Authority, IPOA, has taken up, calling on Kenyans to present evidence that they said will be crucial in the prosecution process of the police officers who are involved, as these matters will be heading to courts of law across the country. And members of parliament from the Kenya Kwanza coalition who had voted for the finance bill now withdrawn have been forced to lie low in the aftermath of the parliamentary proceedings, and which were briefly overrun by the protesters after the demonstrations that had rocked the country. And let's now come back to studio and the live proceedings and the pictures you're seeing from the counties of Nakuru and in Nairobi shortly, where our reporters are keeping an eye to give you an assessment of the situation since morning. Emmanuel To has been there for us. Melita Oletenges was in Kitengela. Marianne Nyambura was in the county of Nakuru. Francis Mtalaki has been reporting from the port city of Mombasa, and Laura Otieno has been keeping an eye on the county of Kisumu. We'll be talking about the consequences of this on the economy, as well as many businesses remain shut, and the decry expressed by the business communities across the country following the protests that had largely kept many businesses off their operation times. And we'll be talking about that. Yesterday, the president said foreigners are undermining Kenya's stability and democracy, pointing out at the Ford Foundation as the engineers of chaos and anarchy when he spoke in the county of Nakuru, and coming back to what appears to be a reset mode for the president, who has now re-embarked on his much loved sort of addressing the public through the sunroof of the presidential car, and also the declarations that he had made yesterday when he toured different parts of Nakuru County. Kevin Osido is from the County Governance Watch with us in studio here to take his account in effect to what's happening across the country. Kevin, good afternoon. You too. Lovely having you here, and it's unprecedented in many aspects, and given what has been happening since last month in June, following the government's concession on some of the major policies, including the withdrawal of the finance bill after it was confronted with the demonstrations that were largely driven by the youth. In a nutshell, are we watching an emboldened citizenry that is making use of Article 37 of the Constitution through engagement in the civic space and demanding good governance from those in authority?
Thank you so much, Amri Kadri. And indeed, as you've rightfully said, that's purely what we are looking at. And beyond Article 37 of the Constitution, we're also focusing on Article 35, purely on access to information. And this is because citizens of the Republic of Kenya are now getting much more knowledgeable about governance processes. Mm-hmm. They are becoming much more aware about government performance and implementation programs. And they are getting a little bit organized in terms of how to hold their governments accountable. And much more fundamentally is to also look at what the role of the citizens is insofar as the various programs of government are concerned, and really about how to make their voices to count. Mm-hmm. And this is premised on a number of constitutional aspirations, where we also look at sovereign power of the people of the Republic of Kenya in terms of Article 1.1 and really the roles of institutions. And one of those institutions that the people are saying that has not done very well in terms of representing them is Parliament, National Assembly and the Senate, and much focus really on the National Assembly. Okay. And now going back to the counties is also the county assemblies. And these are institutions of governance that are supposed to ensure that citizens have mechanisms and opportunities to make their voices account insofar as the legislation processes are concerned. So making in place laws that make it easy for citizens to be able to access information, for citizens to be able to engage with the governments, and for citizens to be able to also get feedback from what programs and even the processes such as public finance management and therefore finance bill, because even as we talk about the national, the finance bill at the national level, the same call is also happening at the county levels, where we are also seeing citizens now getting much more excited to engage with their governments, and they are saying for the doors that are locked against us, we are going to open them. And indeed we have seen them opening doors such as for the National Assembly. We are now seeing them moving into the counties, and that really means that citizens are much more concerned about governance and really what service delivery means to them as a people. Yeah,
and in effect, is then this triggered by their participation and willingness in the civic space?
Yeah.
And is that a cause that is largely prompted by the inability by occupants of institutions that were born out of Katiba 2010, more or less self-incapacitating in terms of undertaking their responsibilities, and also the government largely, both units, national and the county governments, that have failed to live by the expectations of the Kenyan public, and therefore thus the protest prompting good governance, and largely what appears to be the political class now getting back and more or less recycling back to the mode in which they ought to have been advocating for good governance. I mean, it ought to have been straightforward, is it, given the architecture of governance we have, which is straightforward, and the need for good governance as spelled out by the Constitution?
Very correct. It should have been quite clear, outright, and very straightforward. But I think we are seeing lots of government excesses. For instance, issues of impunity, just bare lack of adherence to the rule of law. Issues around corruption, where you have programs that have been budgeted for, and people come and say, we don't want it done this way. In fact, we don't want it at all. But if you really have to do it, then how about you listen to us and you take into account our recommendations and also our voices? And government just outrightly goes out and decides to do whatever it wants to do. And if you look at, for instance, issues around once we vote our leaders into office, we normally expect that there is going to be an induction process. And as County Governance Watch and other stakeholders, we have participated in some of these induction processes, both for the national government leadership and really specifically at the county government levels. But if you look at even the interest of the elected leaders, the politicians, to want to learn about how to run government, to want to learn about how to do a budget, to want to learn about what really public participation means, that interest is really diminished at that level. And so you meet some of them and you ask them, but sir, why were you not there? Why did you walk out and this is a four days session, and you only attended the opening session? So, and the gentleman or the lady just outrightly tells you, I just came for the opening to sign in so that I'm able to get my per diem. And so that really gives you the kind of people that we have entrusted our leadership in, and the kind of people that we probably believe and hope that will be able to give us the best. And unfortunately, the citizens are slowly beginning to realize that we also have a responsibility in terms of how we vote, and that we can ultimately exercise this power to even recall them. And in a number of places, in a number of counties right now, about 6 of them, we have received reports of citizens now organizing to recall their members of county assemblies. In one of the 290 constituencies, we already have a recall process which is already ongoing. And so it means, therefore, that citizens are beginning to also realize what their role in this bad governance, if we could probably call it that, what their role means and what they can be able to do to be able to exercise that authority and sovereignty to rectify this bad governance. And so what it means, therefore, is really to focus on the lessons that we are learning from this particular process. Are there lessons that we think will be able to inform how we, therefore, move forward in terms of our leadership and our governance? Are there lessons that even the political class are learning in terms of how they represent their people? Because, Abdikadir, you realize that the protests that we have seen, particularly focusing on the finance bill, are purely political class made.
Yeah.
Because we attended in terms of monitoring some of those public participation processes on the finance bill, not necessarily for the counties, but for the national government. And in a whole hall, you have members walking in and just sitting with the citizens for 15 minutes. These are people who are told to be there from 9 o'clock.
Yes.
The members arrive at 12. And they tell them tutajitambulisha, alafu tutaelezea why we are here, and then we will just take 1 or 2 questions, then we'll walk out. And indeed, true to their word, they walk out after about 20 minutes. And that really makes, it therefore makes the citizens begin to wonder, do these people really consider us as important stakeholders? Are we really as important partners in this particular process? And that is where the citizens are beginning to realize that really, we also have a stake in this, and we have a chance now to rectify some of these excesses. And I think that part of those lessons, therefore, will inform even in terms of our institutions, both for the representative or legislative institutions, the judiciary, particularly when we talk about issues of corruption and cases of corruption that are in court that also touch on very high-level political names or people that we have seen in this country, and also back to the executive in terms of how we budget for, for meaningful service delivery aspects, for example, health, education, as opposed to a number of things which citizens might not consider as important to them as at that point in time.
And here then comes Parliament, is it? And which had failed to live by the very, dictates of the Constitution in terms of the role that it does play in representation, in legislation, and also on oversight. And when you talk about the public participation exercise that the Finance and National Planning Committee had undertaken, though there was the word of assurance given by the chairperson of the committee, Molo MP Kuria Kimani, that this is not mere cosmetic exercise, that look, you Kenyans, we are going to consider some of your proposals that you had presented before us, but then you realize their conduct is not in tandem with what they ought to be doing. Is this then a time to rectify the shocking institutional failure by Parliament? It is.
It is the right time. In fact, if that time were to be analyzed, the time to have rectified these things was yesterday. And it's therefore really, it borders on us as a people to begin to think through some of the aspects of governance that we are not doing in very well. For example, public participation. And one of those very disturbing elements, Abdulkadir, is the fact that we do not have a policy on public participation. We do not even have a national law on public participation. And so despite what various aspects of the law expect insofar as what public participation is, because we of course go to the Constitution and we have an array of articles that talk about the need to engage people. Then we go even for the sake of public finance management. We have the Public Finance Management Act that also narrows down on public participation. But we need to also move further to look at how do we really undertake this public participation. What are the clear metrics or the indicators or the measures that will make it very easy for citizens to be able to be heard, and to be heard at the point where they are. Because what we have seen happening, and I think that Parliament, particularly the National Assembly, really is learning and taking very important lessons out of this. And one of those lessons, in my view, would be to fast track the enactment of the of the Public Participation Act of the Republic of Kenya, so that within it, then we can be able to have regulations that determine and narrow down on what we need to do, despite the expectation that we only make a gazette notice on 2 widely read newspapers of the Republic of Kenya. That really leaves out so many people, because, for instance, one of the questions we'll be asking is how many Kenyans read the newspapers? So how about other innovative ways or platforms? We have seen the Gen Zs, for example, quite active on X and TikTok, Instagram, and others. So basically the place of social media in terms of also informing how we engage with the wider citizenry, and how much investment Parliament or the National Assembly will also put in terms of picking the input, the proposals, and the recommendations that come from the citizens. But the same measure is also supposed to be exerted at the county government levels, because what happens at the national level is really a replica of what also is supposed to happen at the county level. So it is therefore incumbent upon National Assembly to begin to think through how to make it easy, even for citizens to be excited to attend this public participation process. Because, for instance, we saw on the road maintenance levy, where in a county like one of those counties, only one gentleman turned up for a public participation session. And then today, in one of the newspapers, we are told that actually the law has been passed and that we'll have 25% levied on road maintenance costs for the people of Kenya. And then you go back and you begin to ask yourself, so who are these people who agreed with government that we need to make this additional percentage? Government should stop taking citizens of Kenya for a ride. Governments, that's the national government and the 47 county governments, must begin to think through how they make citizens to want to love what they do, as opposed to now the kind of demonstrations and the kind of feedback, which is quite disturbing. Because, for instance, today is a Tuesday.
Yeah.
We are expecting that in almost all the major towns, business should be going on and people should be working. But Nairobi, for instance, is closed. Kisii is closed. Kitengela, all these places are closed. It's quite disturbing.
Yeah. All right, and the live features you're watching from the Nairobi Central Business District. This is Kimathi Street, where police are engaging protesters, and this has been the situation since morning of the protesters who are waving the national flag, but are unable to penetrate the wall that the police have established, and you can see the photos of the protesters and the police, and who are lobbing tear gas, and we can listen in before we get back to the conversation in studio.
Kuna hoteli wako kwa building.
Any yote ni stock. Wamejaza stock.
Stock nini hapa? Nani yote ni stock yetu?
Tunakata na ikafungiwa bado.
Yeah, you pay for them. They'll be open it.
And these are the live pictures from the Central Business District in Nairobi, where police are engaging the protesters who are demanding raft of changes from the government, as well as the live pictures from the county of Nakuru, where our team, Evans Asiba and Marian Nyambura, are standing by. These are the live shots coming to you from the Central Business District in Nakuru County, where since morning police and protesters have been engaging. And also we are keeping an eye on the county of Kisii, where you have just seen the live images on the broadcast, who have come out to protest against the government this Tuesday, calling for good governance and what they term as accountability in what's appearing to be a countrywide phenomena. Also in the county of Kakamega, protesters this morning had taken to the streets demanding for accountability from the county administration headed by Fernandez Barasa, calling for what they term as accountability on the measure of the finances and how the money that the exchequer funnels to the devolved units, including Kakamega, are accounted for in terms of development projects. And we are back to live at the CBD in Nairobi. This is along Kimathi Street, where protesters and police have been engaging, and also in the company are the reporters and their camera persons who have been with them. Now, this is the shot on the part of Kenyatta Avenue, where police have been blocking the protesters from accessing, and this has been the similar event as we witnessed on the 25th of June 2024, when the protesters briefly overran Parliament, and the scampering for safety of parliamentarians who were forced to use the tunnel and to flee to safety, and the evacuation that had also led to concerns from members of Parliament. Now you are watching the live pictures from the intersection that links Kenyatta Avenue and Kimathi Street in Nairobi Central Business District, where our team is also keeping an eye on to give you an assessment of the events since morning here on Citizen Television. A summary of the events that had largely gripped the country since last month, the Gen Z demonstrations that had called for the government to walk back and withdraw the Finance Bill 2024, and the government confronted with the demonstrations that had denounced the Finance Bill 2024, which they say had contained punitive taxes, and the inability of their lawmakers and their representatives who did not listen to their input when they appeared before the Finance and National Planning Committee during the public participation exercise. And the bill, after it was passed by Parliament, was later withdrawn following the events of 25th, which led to the head of state addressing the nation from State House in Nairobi on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, the following day, 26th, where he said, after consultation with the Kenya Kwanza Parliamentary Group meeting, they agreed to withdraw the finance bill. More than 40 people have been reportedly killed, mostly in Nairobi during the parliament. It's the situation in parliament where the precincts of the National Assembly and the Senate were breached by the protesters in Nairobi, leading to members of parliament fleeing for their safety, and largely they used the multi-million tunnel in running for safety. The protesters and the organizers are saying that despite withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024, they are calling for what they term as an end to a culture of corruption, which is, according to them, deep-rooted and corroding institutions of government, and the aspect of injustice and inequality, which they say is largely a phenomena that continues to underpin the state. Stung by the degree of the protest, the president made major concessions, including the withdrawal of the bill, scrapping of the funding by the state for the office of the First Lady, coming to the X-Space on formerly Twitter to face the youth, and in a 2-hour discussion where he fielded questions and also disbanded his entire cabinet last week on Tuesday, awaiting for reconstitution of the cabinet. And this is after saying that he will go on a soul-searching spree to determine the fate of his cabinet and later to disband the entire cabinet. The head of state came to power with ambitious agenda for the youth, who today are disgruntled as they were during the previous administrations of unemployment, underemployment, sidelining, and the quality of jobs that they have anticipated after graduation from the universities. But that isn't the reality, according to many of them. And the lawmakers have, since the passage of the bill and the breaching of Parliament's prisons, have been forced to lie low in the aftermath of the voting pattern, and mostly from the Kenya Kwanza administration. And the shocking institutional failure by Parliament is what now the focus for the country's youth. The president yesterday said the Ford Foundation, which is American-based, is the cause of instability and chaos, saying that the stability and democracy of Kenya would not be undermined. He pointed at them as the engineers of chaos and anarchy, saying that if they are not interested in the enhancement of democracy in the country, then they either style up or ship out. We'll call out all those, he said, who are bent on rolling back our hard-won democracy, when he spoke in Nakuru County yesterday. That is President William Ruto, and will be talking about that. Our battery of journalists are covering and across the country in the counties of Nairobi. Emmanuel To Oletenges is covering the situation in Kitengela. Marianne Nyambura is in Nakuru Central Business District. Francis Mtalaki is in the county of Mombasa. And Laura Otieno has been monitoring the situation in the county of Kisumu since morning. Kevin, coming back to you. Yeah. And this, it seems that is largely touching at the nerve of our governance. And given the conduct of Parliament away from the public participation exercise, and which was largely the around the Finance Bill 2024 now withdrawn, in general, Parliament seems to have failed on the very 3 key thematic roles of representation, legislation and oversight.
Sure. That's right. In fact, if you assess because part of what we do at County Governance Watch is also to assess performance of the legislative arms of government. And this is both at national and also at county levels. And the 13th Parliament has not done very well, especially the National Assembly. And this is really geared towards looking at the indicator of passage of legislations. Yeah. And if you look at even the engagement in terms of the most critical aspects of the Kenyan populace, they look very detached, disinterested, and a number of times, even if you look at the kind of quorum that we have in the National Assembly, yeah, when important conversations are going on, you don't see the representatives either in Parliament, most of them, or having a robust engagement, because the reason why you're a parliamentarian is so that you're able to debate, and you don't see as much debate in terms of the issues that touch Kenyans at the core of their existence. And hence the reason why we see even very critical sectors of our economy and also of our populace even going on strike. For example, education. When you have JSS teachers going on strike, whereas you have parliamentarians in the National Assembly who are supposed to be engaging in important conversations to find solutions, they are missing. You look at health, for instance, you have doctors going on strike, whether they are junior or they are senior doctors. The fact that health as a critical sector of the economy and of the republic, of service delivery, of governance, is not working. Yet you have a committee on health, for instance, at the National Assembly that is supposed to be executing some of these very important conversations, where you even expect that they are supposed to meet with the leadership of the protesters to understand really the core of the issues. That we don't see it happening. And it can go on and on, including in agriculture, where we have talked about fake fertilizers. Kenyans have been fed with, bad oil, nasty rice, things that you do not expect to happen when you have people that you have bestowed your sovereignty and your power to them to be able to speak on your behalf. And it is because we take note of the fact that not all of us can go to parliament. But the fact that God has given you the opportunity through the sovereign power of the people to go and represent them, please go and exercise that responsibility. But again, Abdikadir, we take note of the inadequacies in parliament, particularly the National Assembly, where, for instance, some of them cannot even write their names in a piece of paper. And we know this because we see them, we interact with them, and we train some of them. And it really is quite disturbing. And it goes back to really the kind of people that we vote into office and what drives us to be able to vote. And so our political culture in terms of informing how we exercise that sovereignty, and indeed, once the person has been given that mandate, how you also carry yourself in parliament. I think that really is an important concern that should be able to exert a lot of pressure on the people of Kenya to begin to think through how we vote, and even the indicator of leadership and political culture that we have as a people to be able to inform who we vote for. And I say this with a lot of cognizance to the fact that we have seen very many good educated people also go to parliament or to National Assembly, but a lot of times you ask them, did you even present a bill? Is there anything that you did to be able to speak to your term in office as a parliamentarian? And most of them have nothing. I also say this taking note of the fact that a lot of times our political parties determine, or in some areas in this country, once the party leader says Abdikadir Tosha, it ends there, whether Abdikadir is capable or incapable. But the fact that the political leadership has already made its voice count. So the moment that we have as a people of Kenya right now really presents us with very many opportunities to ask ourselves several questions around how we respond to the gaps and inadequacies that we already begin to see in our leadership, our political culture, and even in our governance. And all this boils down even to the executive arm. Because when you look at how parliament vets people, for example, who are supposed to therefore go and undertake very critical engagement and implementation of the sectors, very many questions remain to be asked in terms of how that process is manipulated, the cost of engaging in that kind of a process, and the space of the citizens in terms of the petitions that people send to parliament, the kind of questions that even other agencies like DCI or DPP will raise around some of these people that are being vetted by parliament, and hence therefore how they take note of those kind of issues. And then lastly, still on parliament, is also the interference by the executive, where, for example, even as we speak right now, most of the politicians who are supposed to be seen to be in the opposition decry the fact that the executive has actually bought, quote unquote, some of their members. And so debates on some important issues and even the voting in some of the important issues in parliament have really been mismanaged, if not really interfered with. And that, therefore, is also a big question in terms of how we look at the three arms of government, executive, legislature, and also the judiciary.
Because here the concern is largely around the quality of debate at the House and also the conduct of parliamentarians, which will be coming shortly too. You talked about the executive, and Parliament under the Constitution is given enormous powers. For example, the aspect of budgeting. But how then can they address the constant failure in, number one, responding to some of the red flags that were raised by the control of budgeted corruption, and then second, the sudden causing up to whoever occupies State House in Nairobi, yet they have the political immunity to finish that term unless recalled by their constituents, but they end up warming up to the head of state, whoever he is, and the occupant of State House at any given time. yet they sit in house that can impeach the occupant of State House. When can they understand these two issues that are very critical in their undertaking of assignments?
The challenge we have with our parliament is the understanding of critical issues. And because most of them, or some of them are also my friends or people that we engage with, we sometimes on the sidelines hold some of these very important conversations. And the responses are quite disheartening. For instance, the question on the control of budget and the reports that are submitted to Parliament. We have two very important committees in Bunge, if not maybe 5 of them. We have the Public Accounts Committee, we have the Public Investments Committee, yes. And we would go further to even look at the Budget Committee and the Finance Committee and all those committees, including the Committee on Leadership and the House Business Committee, to the extent that the degree of understanding of critical issues, yes. Like those reports having raised questions on implementation of budgets and queries on how we basically prioritize the programs of government, yes. Against the budgets that have been passed. I think that should really concern our members of parliament. That, for instance, if resources were put for health, and a report says that some of this money was moved from that particular sector and moved into a sector, for instance, let's say infrastructure, or which is supposed to build State House or whatever, do some aspects which were not, which the citizens do not consider as a priority as at that point in time. It is incumbent upon members to be able to ask those critical questions. And if they cannot be listened to, really begin to provide feedback to the people of Kenya. And you see, for instance, we say that Azimio right now are taking advantage of the Gen Z protests. Of course, I know some of them will come and say, why do you think we are taking advantage? Yeah. But they are taking advantage because now they are beginning to come up and say, we have been raising these concerns, but how come a number of the issues that the Gen Z and other Kenyans have been raising are actually being responded to by the highest man on the land, the president himself, as opposed to when they are raised by the political class. It means, therefore, that there is some bit of compromise that happens between the politician in government and the politician in the opposition, which the citizen outside might not be able to understand. Hence, now the understanding by the politician in government to be able to respond very vigorously and quite efficiently to the issues that are being raised by the citizen outside. But yet, Abdikadir, the Constitution even gives the political class, rather the politicians, opportunities to engage with the citizens. The law does not bar a parliamentarian from engaging with your constituents. And we see them every day on Sundays, on Saturdays, when they are speaking from podiums of churches and all that. We ask them now to begin to have their own platforms. Meet your constituents at your convenient time and discuss critical issues with them, because then you also immunize yourself against the kusalimiana which we are currently seeing. And this kusalimiana is happening because Kenyans don't understand how you cannot speak for them, that a law or a bill that they think is quite grievous on their issues, you actually go ahead and you say yes to it. And when you go back to the Hansard, we even see you voting yes to it. How did you understand, therefore, the sovereignty of the people and the interests when it comes to you representing them? So I think this is an opportunity for the political class also to go back and begin to ask themselves, how can we be able to bring the citizens closer to understanding our role? Because indeed, the citizens now understand the role of the parliamentarian. But in terms of providing feedback, that therefore becomes quite progressive. And that is why the law has given the citizen that power to be able to do petitions, to be able to write memoranda documents, and even to be able to write letters to state authorities. And that feedback is expected to be given. And that when you do these letters, your member of parliament or your MC at the county level should be able to also consider the issue that you are raising as an important issue, because he or she is representing you in the House. And we don't see that happening quite robustly.
Then where can that sudden introspection come from? Because in the end, we have doubts over the capacity of the bicameral setup that we have and the members. But in the end, there's the electoral cycle, which is a democratic process that yields who we have as a country, because we can't all represent ourselves. And it all comes down, is it, to how we vote as well,
Sure.
and the people we put into those positions.
Sure.
Then with regards to the enhancement in terms of now upscaled civic engagement that the people of Kenya are having, can they then make the critical decision required 2027 in August, when the opportunity presents itself again to populate the bicameral setup with people of integrity, people who will represent them as they so require, and people who will hold the executive to account?
And that is really the direction that I think the people of Kenya are going to take, bordering on the dissolution of the cabinet.
Yeah.
And part of why the president, I think, read into the wisdom of the people of Kenya and dissolved his cabinet is because there were a lot of issues that were raised, including on accountability, integrity issues, including issues of competencies and just the skills of leadership. Because even if you are a cabinet secretary for health, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a medical doctor, but your skill of leadership, which therefore border on issues of consultation, engagement, involvement of people. You can decide to be sitting with medical doctors who are the practitioners every Monday, and they tell you the challenges they have, and they actually see you responding to those challenges, and you give them feedback, and you move on, even as a CS Health who is not a medical practitioner. But the degree of engaging the broader spectrum of the stakeholder populace of the department or of the ministry that you had, I think really gives you a lot of acceptability within the people. And that really, shields you from a lot of incompetencies, because people will be seeing you doing the right things as opposed to you making some certain obvious mistakes which otherwise would not have been made. But therefore, the question on 2027 comes in because the opportunity that we therefore have right now is to be able to go down to look at the competencies of people, the integrity aspects. Who are these people? And what have they done? And what can they be able to do? And so that anyone who wants to run for office in 2027 will be expected to do the right thing and to be seen to be doing the right thing, as opposed to assuming that the people who voted for you made a mistake and that you're the person who is always right. Other than that, therefore, is to ask the citizens to begin to organize around spaces where we can be able to identify these leaders of integrity. And there are quite a number. The only challenge, therefore, that begs Abdikadir is the fact that how our politics is done. It's a very dirty game sometimes. It's quite expensive and quite involving many times, especially when it comes to issues around security and or the insecurity related to the political games in our country. But that, therefore, means that we begin to ask ourselves, how can we shield? And we have seen citizens, given these past weeks, really shielding the people that they think speak for them. Yeah. And if you look at some of the conversations that are taking place on X, or even some of the postings on certain social media platforms, they are already even having their own independent-minded vetting for people who are coming up in terms of how you engage with people and or what you are hiding in the closets. And I believe that all this is going to be carried over to 2027, and it will therefore give opportunities for people who feel comfortable and confident to be able to exercise effective leadership and governance in terms of providing services to the people.
All right, and let's now take a look at, though that is a democratic process which is unpredictable in many ways. Precisely. In terms of what it yields as a process and as an output. Let's focus on one of the major decisions that the president had made on Thursday last week in sending home his entire cabinet. While that is a process that depends on millions of Kenyans who will exercise their right, this is purely a political process that he has control over.
Correct.
But there has been challenge, isn't it, if you observe the pattern of populating the cabinet secretary since the advent of the current Katiba that we have, of people who we get there.
Yeah.
With regards to the integrity, with regards to the doubts that hang over their head, with regards to issues that cloud their personal life in terms of how they can deliver. Yet we have a pool of available public servants and Kenyans who are professionals, who are competent enough to serve in those situations. Can the president then avoid the very same slide that he had in the first appointments that he did with regards to the people that he got as his cabinet members, and now come up with Kenyans who merit those positions, who will in the end aid him in the delivery of his manifesto?
Abdikadir, that's a very difficult aspect. And it's because, in my view, and looking at Kenya Kwanza and President William Ruto, the president has been under siege from his week one of governance as a president of the Republic. And this is because if you listen to his communication on a daily basis, he makes references to his cabinet, he makes references to his PSS, he makes references to the people that he expects to be able to deliver on his behalf. If you look at the body language of His Excellency the President, I think that President William Ruto is a very tired man, because he's a president who wants to be everywhere, whether it's in opening a latrine in Nakuru, to opening something in Kirinyaga, whether it's in, he wants to be everywhere, as opposed to believing that the people that he has entrusted with these assignments as cabinet secretaries are going to be able to perform. But in so assuming is the fact that the president is also the custodian of all their meritocracy claims in terms of the CVs. He understands. He has a lot of intelligence in terms of who the cabinet secretaries are, and he has also the parliamentary briefs on the vetting of all his appointees. Now, that is going to be very difficult, especially looking at the people that we expect. And I foresee that even out of those who are fired, some of them are going to come back. Either 3 or 4 of them will come back as maybe in different portfolios. But in addition to that, is also to look at how we play our politics in Kenya. A number of times, and if we were to have time and go through the entire list of cabinet secretaries who are fired, most of them are leaders of political parties, And those are people who are assumed to have contributed something, especially numbers, political numbers, in terms of votes from their regions, to have the president as president, having voted in and won by to our winning the election. And ahead of 2027, what is their political, clout in terms of bringing together the votes that we expect? And
but isn't that then, Kevin, when you're beholden to the idea that person X and person V had contributed this politically, therefore he warrants or she warrants to be in cabinet, is that then not a recipe for failure? Because you look at what the president said on the 1st of August 2023 when they signed the performance contracts at State House in Nairobi, where he put them to task on basic issues like timekeeping and managing the CSS for traveling out of the country, even when they can delegate that responsibility to other staff members within the portfolio that they hold, changing clothes at airports across the world. I mean, that's an admission of failure. It is. That the people you got from the onset had failed you. Then this comes as an opportunity that the Kenyan people, through the protest, had presented you with, in coming up with people of competence, of integrity, who merit those positions. Why then get beholden to what someone has contributed when you can have people who can help you deliver on your manifesto and you can win over the hearts of Kenyans?
You get beholden because you begin to think through your risk management analysis. And you say, and I think the president is getting to that level where he's beginning to probably see himself as a one-term president, and he's saying, Sio lazima, it doesn't matter. Sio lazima, we don't have to. And hence the reason why he's now preparing Kenyans for some of the faces like the ones you and I are probably thinking that are going to come over. But it is a dilemma that I believe the president is actually engulfed into, and is thinking probably that I need to give Kenyans fresh faces. They may not be as fresh faces, but they have to be people who are going to respond to some of the queries that the people of Kenya have been asking, and especially on delivery of services. And it even beats logic, because in the office of the president, we have a whole unit that is supposed to undertake issues of delivery, service delivery, and performance management. And you ask yourself, haven't these institutions or agencies been speaking to the presidency so that they are able to advise outside the seat of Kenyans some of the gaps that they find, or some of the challenges that they think that the people who are in cabinet are not responding to? Hence the frustration for the president to even come out and say, if I know more than you in your ministry, then there is a problem. For the deputy president to actually make some of the utterances that you spoke about. And it also boils down to the question of trust. whether the people who are in these offices or that have been given these offices trust that they are capable to deliver. And so it is a risky game, which I think the president is already boiling down into and is saying, I don't think I have to carry the burden of so many people as opposed to my legacy as a president. President William Ruto, in my view, I do not think he wants to go down as a president who had a lot of demonstrations, not just of the political class, but purely of sectors. Because under his presidency, we have seen doctors striking, teachers going on strike. We have seen just yesterday digital drivers, clouding the streets of Nairobi. And almost every sector is not performing the way in the expectation of what the president promised to the people of Kenya. So wherever he's seated, I am sure he's thinking through bringing on board the right people who will not only respond to the service delivery expectations of implementation, but also begin to think through the political process of 2027. Because I'm sure he's a president who wants to stay over. He's a president who wants to have maybe the magical 10 years, 5-year term of our presidency as per our constitution. And I don't think that he wants to go down as someone who failed to be able to read, the signs and the moments of the day.
Yeah, but there seems to be, when you look at some of the major plans that the government had, for example, in funding the offices of the First Lady and Mama Rachel Ruto and Mama Dorcas Rigathi, and also the other misplaced, funding to other government areas.
Yeah.
They ought to have read the mood, is it, when you have a demography that is that forms a lion's share of your population is unemployed, disgruntled because of the opulence that members of your cabinet had displayed in public. I mean, this is a failure, is it, on the part of government in failing to read the mood of Kenyans on what needs to happen? Because the areas that are of priority, for example, healthcare, education, working infrastructure, seem to be largely ignored when it comes to the government's attention. But rather, if you look at the projection of some government officials, how they have conducted their businesses in public was wanting. Why do you think then they have failed to read the mood of Kenyans, which had necessitated what we are witnessing across the country for most part of June and today?
The failure to read the mood of the citizens, in my view, was and continues to be an assumption of the government in terms of probably assuming that Kenyans do not read, they are misinformed or uninformed, and that they will do nothing about it. And a lot of times in our political circles, you hear them saying, "Mutadu, what will you do about it? Tutafanya mpende musipende, we'll do it whether you like it or you don't." But the context that we are dealing with right now is a context that says we will stop you whether you like it or not. And we have actually seen the president being stopped, whether he liked it or he didn't, and whether he likes it or he doesn't, or whether he will like it or he will not. Because people are getting much more informed, and they are getting much more emboldened as we already saw. To therefore believe that probably the former presidencies had the offices of the First Lady and the Second Lady and much more informed, and they are getting much more emboldened as we already saw. To therefore believe that probably the former presidencies had the offices of the First Lady and the Second Lady, and that they had programs which were not very, in terms of their budgeting, may not have been as open to Kenyans as is probably expected, and therefore assume that you can have a lot of resources or money into tunes of hundreds of billions and put it into the offices of the First Lady and the Second Lady, and then treat Kenyans to nothing. Because if you look at the former First Lady, there were certain major programs that you could actually touch in terms of what Mama Margaret Kenyatta used to do, maternal child health. Very critical to many homes, immunization of children. Very critical to very many homes across the country. Having, purchase of even partnerships with counties, because I remember a number of counties in Siaya, in Taita Taveta, in Mombasa, in Nakuru, where a lot of programs that the then First Lady used to run were actually even piloted and used. Some of the counties were used as showcases, and we had hoped that probably the Ministry of both of Health at both national and county level in terms of policy and implementation would pick them up to embed them into government, so that when you have a First Lady coming in like Mrs. Rachel Ruto, you now don't treat Kenyans to an experience like the one we are seeing, where you have over 120 intercessors, being paid by taxpayers' money, assuming that Kenyans do not have that opportunity to also pray for themselves and probably even get something out of it, other than the answers that come from heaven. So the accountability around some of these resources, even for the Second Lady, because for us in governance, we term it as double corruption. I mean, sorry, not double corruption, but double budgeting, where you have an agency, for instance, like NACADA, that is supposed to execute functions and roles and mandates related to drugs and substance abuse. But on the other hand, you also have an office of the Second Lady that is also purporting, quote unquote, to be engaging in a similar exercise or a similar process. Then you budget for both of them, and in a number of times you go to NACADA even for partnership opportunities, and they tell you, unfortunately, we don't have money, but our officers will come and we will speak. That really is disturbing to many Kenyans, and so government assumed that probably people do not know about some of these things, of course, and then that they would do nothing about it. But as it is right now, as we already said, Kenyans are getting much more interested in their governance processes, in their accountability measures, and even in the expenditures of their resources. And that is why, for the people who will be president tomorrow, I think issues around budgeting for office of the First Lady, which is non-constitutional. It is nowhere in our constitution that we'll have an office of a spouse of the president to be treated as a First Lady. And we need to learn from other certain jurisdictions, like in the US. We need to learn from jurisdictions such as in the UK, even Rwanda here, or even in Uganda. How do they treat the First Lady or the spouse of the president? A lot of times you see them seated at the back and only appear on certain critical state functions when they are necessarily needed. So Kenya cannot be very separated or different in terms of how we treat our First and Second Ladies, particularly when it comes to concerns around public expenditure, and in the context where Kenyans are saying, you are taxing us so much and we are getting nothing out of it. So it is a good thing that His Excellency the President commented on this, and he said we are going to stall this in addition to several other austerity measures. If there is interest in strengthening the office, let it be legalized, let it be put in a mechanism where we are able to budget for it effectively, and also to give it terms of reference that relate closely to the citizens of the Republic.
All right, and you are watching the live proceedings from the Nairobi Central Business District, where at the intersection that links Kimathi Street and Kenyatta Avenue is where police are engaging the protesters, and this has been the situation since morning of the engagement that is happening. And you are watching the live proceedings here on Citizen Television on a day that the youth-led demonstrations have made a comeback, calling for more reforms and demanding the government on the issues regarding an end to corruption, injustice and inequality, despite concessions that the government had made, especially on the withdrawal of the finance bill, the scrapping of the state funding for the office of the First Lady, the coming to X-Space of President William Ruto, and having a 2-hour engagement with the youth and disbanding his entire cabinet. What you are seeing is the aid that is now offered to an injured protester there, and he is being carried presumably to an awaiting first aid team at the intersection of Banda Street and Kimathi. And what you're also watching are the events coming to you live from the county of Nakuru, where the situation has been the same. Our team Evans Asiba and Marianne Nyambura have been keeping an eye also on Nakuru County, where protesters and police have been engaging since morning as part of the countrywide call for demonstrations by the youth, calling for the government to institute reforms that they said will help in the aspect of good governance and constitutionalism, as well as the counties of Mombasa, where Francis Mtalaki has been since morning. Laura Otieno has been in Kisumu County, and our reporter Melita Oletenges was also in Kitengela, where police had equally engaged the demonstrators. And today, part of the issues that they have listed as the areas where they want the government to pay attention to and address includes what they term as the cutting down on unnecessary expenditure, and also addressing the issue of graft, which they say had locked many young Kenyans out of job opportunities, despite the education standard and qualifications that they have. And we are watching the split screen of the events in Nakuru and in Nairobi counties, where demonstrators or protesters are engaging security officials in both counties, and we'll be giving you the other live pictures from the other counties where the protests are happening here on this special coverage here on Citizen Television. Kevin, still on the issues regarding what the demonstrations have achieved, and this is withdrawal of what the government had largely billed as its tax-containing bill, the Finance Bill 2024, and also the major one among that is banning of the cabinet. But going forward, the head of state has hinted at an all-inclusive dialogue process, which did not kickstart as anticipated on Monday yesterday, but seems to be also causing interest in terms of who will attend and what the agenda will be. We had NADCO, the National Dialogue Committee, which had concluded and issued a report. Again, we are having another dialogue. Seems that we are in this continuous perpetuity of having talks amongst the political players and also the stakeholders, but no output in terms of the substance and addressing what are on the table at the moment that these young Kenyans are presenting. Do you think this will be the key towards prosperity that everyone aspires here in Kenya, and the talks that the head of state had called for?
Talks are good. Dialogues are even better. But unfortunately, that is not what Kenyans are asking for right now. And as you mentioned, Abdikadir, the NADCO report, we had the BBI report.
Yes.
We have had in this country the 2007-2008 task force reports. We have had in this country the TGRC reports. We have had in this country the Kriegler Commission that also came up with a report on a number of electoral justice issues. Kenya, we are always talking and dialoguing, but unfortunately, as you rightfully said, we never get to an end of these talks in terms of any meaningful progressive output, to the extent that, for instance, the NADCO right now has been over 2 years since the process began. The report was issued over one year and some months ago. Only one bill out of the 9 have been executed. It therefore really bothers us as governance practitioners, and indeed the people of Kenya, on the goodwill of most of these talks. And hence the reason why, in fact, I believe that this particular multi-sectoral talk did not kickstart as was anticipated, because of confusion in terms of, one, what are we talking about? Yes, of course, we know what the issues are. In fact, the BBI even narrowed down on 9 of the issues that most people thought were quite paramount. And even learning from the BBI process, which was also in courts, and the courts threw it out, we went and established a legal mechanism, therefore, to be able to anchor the NADCO process, the National Dialogue Committee process. And so Parliament had a conversation, and they decided to actually put it somewhere, append it somewhere in law, so that then it is clear about the outputs or some of the recommendations. But as we speak right now, Kenyans cannot be able to touch. And some of the critical issues, if you remember, about the NADCO process, like the cost of living, is the reason why we have all these demonstrations on the streets, particularly on taxation, critical primary commodities in families, and critical services for a number of the people, for many, if not all the people of Kenya. But unfortunately, government decides to give them a deafening ear. And as we narrow down on the public participation process, even when the voices of the people of the Republic of Kenya come and say, we don't like what you are proposing, can we do it in a better way? The government still assumes that, they're just yapping and talking about nothing, and that they do not understand governance and the political gimmicks of running a government. Yeah. And that is really why I do not think that these dialogues will pay. In fact, some of the conversations that are going on is to be able to bring in the opposition into the government through conversations. And if you look at the wider opposition political parties, otherwise called Azimio, you realize that some of the political leaders of the parties within Azimio are already dissenting from this conversation. And so the question around, one, who will be on that particular table, and to what extent will they be able to speak on behalf of the people of Kenya? The government should be able to think outside the box in terms of opportunities and mechanisms to be able to listen to and hear the people of Kenya. I'm very happy because I think we have been here with you and your other friends, if not colleagues, around asking the president to be a present president. For the first time in the presidency of President William Ruto, we have seen him sitting in the country for more than a month since this protest began. Our president should have been probably in Rwanda right now, engaging in elections, or he would have been in the US, or he would have been somewhere, if not in Haiti or another country. But for the first time, I think it is important for the president to note that the more time you spend, even as a father, with your children, the better it is for you to understand who they are, some of the challenges that they are going through, and even what you are doing to respond to those challenges. And that if you cannot do anything, you communicate it back to them, and you are able to inform them about your plans to address some of those people. We have asked the president in a number of sessions to get back to how he campaigned. And the president used to host what were called the county regional conversations. Yes. What has happened to President William Ruto? Why is he not able to now convene those stakeholders in their multitudes, in those halls that he used to go to? All the counties or the regions wrote manifestos. They had documents which they presented to the president through the economic fora. What has happened to those kind of beautiful conversations? The people who sit close to the president need to also be salimiwad, because I believe that in a number of occasions and spaces they are misadvising and misleading President William Ruto. Get back to the politician you are, get back to the strategist that you are, get back to the listening president that you are, because failure to listen to the people is hence the reason why all these questions are being raised. And so for him to be able to create time to listen to people, respond to the issues, I think is going to be able to give him an opportunity without necessarily thinking through a mechanism where 150 people are going to sit. Because in this country, Abdikadir,
and the rationale here, because the formula in coming up with that is also now a contestation.
It is.
I mean, you have a youth that is not concerned about those talks. They are saying because we are leaderless, the criterion coming up with our representatives
is not there.
Is not there, is non-existent. You have a divide or a split amongst the opposition parties. You have the government that has not been clear about the way forward in terms of where that will happen, what will be the agendas. I mean, this triple confusion is likely to contribute to the ongoing protest, is it?
Precisely, and it is already contributing to that process. Remember, even before this, there was a call by the head of public service for different organizations to submit a list. So far, we have not been informed about who submitted a list for who to represent them. We do not know the terms of reference of the engagement of those people who are going to be speaking at that particular session. Of course, they had said that the president would hold the first meeting of that particular sitting. We are not sure about whether he's going to listen or he's going to again enact himself into the speaker president. Our president is speaking too much in almost all these sessions. And I think in part of the strategy of leadership is also to sit back and watch and particularly listen to what the people are saying. President William Ruto is not listening. He needs to get back and listen to what the people are saying. And despite his challenges or the government's challenges with part of its agencies like DCI and NIS and others, investigative agencies and the information that they gather from the people across the country. And I don't know why the presidency is not as consistent, because we have also seen them recording people, even in their villages, and assuming or making some acts of the president speaking to them. The president needs to make that as a daily venture, where you call people randomly. Call Kevin Osido, because you have my number. Yeah. And ask me, how is it doing with devolution? What do you think is happening? These matters, if you are president, under County Governance Watch, where I serve, sometimes we ask citizens to assume they are governors, and we tell them, assuming you are a governor, yes, and you have 2 minutes to speak to the citizens, what would you tell them? And they write, and we share those things with counties. The president needs to be as innovative, assuming that you are under siege and assuming that you are a very heavy opponent or opposition like the Gen Z movement and a majority of Kenyans. How would you enact yourself and make it easier for the conversations to happen without necessarily locking or blocking a small number of people? Because 150 of the 52 plus million Kenyans is such a small number. And it is because Kenyans are also stratified very differently in our demographics. Yeah. Even for Boda Boda, they are totally, the way they engage is also very different. For Mama Mbogas, how they engage is very different. But yet this is supposed to be a hustler government. In those conversations, like in all the other conversations, we have not seen the hustler representatives. We have not even heard the voices of the hustlers. So bringing up conversations like this, and the youth are even saying that despite all these sectoral issues that we have, even our voices have not been heard. To the level where even in the X conversation, yes, they were asking him, you have all these advisors, including our women's advisor. Yes. How come as young people we don't have an advisor? And so if you are to speak to the young people, they'll tell you, as they are saying, we do not need that, because we just want a government that will engage effectively, a government that will be as accountable, a government that will not make fake, empty promises. And that way, they will get much more engulfed and engaged into governance processes, and they will be able to have opportunities to also share their ways of, running a government, or innovative ways that government can be able to put in place to be able to embolden the youth voices in how the government operates, beyond programs like Kazi kwa Vijana and all these others.
Yeah, and is it then a move that may as well end the assumption by the political elite of taking the Kenyan public for granted, for example, that this protest may end up bringing that culture to an end? For example, how they went into parliament when on that crucial day the parliamentarians had passed the Finance Bill 2024, now withdrawn, and also generally the conduct of how the likes of David Inde have changed tune, have changed their responses towards how the Gen Zs have been protesting, the likes of the majority leader Kimani Ichung'wah, who said, look, this is a generation that is not used to demonstrations. They arrive at the protest scene by on board an Uber. They eat chicken at KFC. So largely, is then this going to end what for a very long time the political class had taken for granted? That culture of more or less impunity.
It's already ending it, actually. And if you look at the kind of scenes that we are seeing across the country and the degree of importance and response that these kind of protests are actually facing, or rather meeting, from the highest seat, the apex seat in the country, the presidency or the president, I think that is a clear indicator that a lot of the assumptions are actually being closed, and that people now in public offices are going to be much more concerned about their roles and responsibilities in government, and really service delivery and responding to the issues that citizens are facing. I believe that part of this is, of course, the lessons around how mandamanos or protests or demonstrations have been done in the past, where you assume that, oh yeah, wata demonstrate tu na kesho watachoka, or once we respond to them by meeting Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga, we have a handshake, this thing is over.
And that seems to be not the case.
That's really what it used to be, assumption that it is the former Prime Minister who is the mother, the father, the uncle, and the auntie of all these mandamanos. Right now, there is a clear, a proper leadership, which is leaderless, and they are saying, even the tools that you used in the past is not what we are looking for. We are going to just come to you with water, and our phones to be able to take photos. But even as we come to you, we have already done our proper analysis of the issues. And these issues are actually dealt with way in the night when probably some of the politicians are asleep. Of course, we know that most of them don't sleep. But by the time they get to the streets, they know how much money was allocated to health, for example, and how much has been embezzled. They know how much who went to Dubai with how much money and where they were arrested and what happened. They are already much more aware, and they have the information because, again, given the world being a global village, the people in those places have contacts, they have networks, they get all those things on their WhatsApps. And so with that kind of arrangement, Abdikadir, it becomes very difficult for the then or the former politicians to engage with this generation because the tools of the trade are totally different. In the past, probably it would have been stones. Even right now in our TV screens, would have been seen people throwing stones at the police. As it is right now, they look quite, harmless. There are people who are just dancing to their own tunes, and on very minimal occasions do we see even some disgruntled demonstrators throwing stones at the police. But the organizing around what we are seeing and the messaging of the content of the issues which they are sharing or passing out to the political class should really inform the changes that we are seeing. That the game, the kind of play that we used to see is already over, and that the kind of generation that we are dealing with right now is a generation that is much more informed, and they know their issues. And hence the reason why I believe the president was able to disband his cabinet, because probably in some of the quarters he was being fed with information about his cabinet secretaries, information about his principal secretaries, information about letters that are being written to government offices and they're not being responded to. Photos of roads that are terrible, and people keep, organizing themselves to be able to respond to those challenges, and the government is doing nothing. And so he's saying, now that you have fed me with all this information, allow me to lock myself and present to you a team that will be able to respond to these issues. But that team that is coming should also be cognizant of the fact that these Gen Zs are not going anywhere. They are going to be at their doors, they are going to be engaging with them, and they are going to continue to research on what government is supposed to do.
And listening to them, and they seem to be viewing the president, the government by extension, and the opposition and Raila Odinga from the same lenses, and they think that these are colleagues within the arena who feed from the same trough, and therefore are necessitating why they are objected to the dialogue process that the president called for, which in effect hasn't taken off. It seems that to an extent the disgruntlement will have a spillover effect to even the opposition party.
Precisely.
Which at the moment, from where you sit, if you are a young person in Kenya, has not done enough in terms of holding the government itself to account.
Precisely. And if you listen to the conversation that has been spanning, they are even making those intergenerational distinctions and saying, our mothers, our fathers, you have had your time. You should have done this many years back. You did not.
Yeah.
And they are saying, now sit back and watch. And I remember that on the first week of the demonstrations, if not the second day, they even sent a note to Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga, and they told him, we thank you so much for having done so much for this country, but now please sit back and allow us to take charge. And if you look at globally, in fact, in the global arena, it is the young people who are now taking over governance, politics, various industries, including the digital space, etc. And it therefore is a call for the political class to begin to look at how we engage with this particular generation. Millennials like myself tried taking over from the Gen X, the Generation X's and others in terms of the emancipation of political engagement and governance processes. And so even as the Gen Zs are also organizing and assuming or imagining that they can be able to do it, it is important to also think about the other generations and ask yourselves, for example, the spaces that you enjoy is in the new constitution, which you are not part of. At least your generation is now benefiting from some of these issues. It's a generation of people like Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga, and then 2005, we had the first referendum, 2010, we have the constitution, in the midst of all the other political processes that we have had. So what therefore needs to happen is I imagine a mechanism or a scenario where all the generations are seated and an intergenerational dialogue is happening without necessarily thinking through the mistakes, the gaps, the challenges that one generation contributed to be able to make things worse. Because even as you present these issues as a Gen Zs, the people who are going to receive them and siphon and even act on them are not in your generation. They are in the generations that were ahead of you. And so again, mechanisms and tactics to be able to engage with the other generations who are not part of the Generation X. And that is purely where I think the president and his team are having the dilemma, to the extent where they have to almost concede to everything because they do not know anything about this generation. And as you mentioned, some of the advisors like Mheshimiwa David Ndii, we have also seen some of them saying it is true that we are also struggling even with setting up a TikTok account. We are struggling with having to even, engage in the X chats, and I have to call my daughter or my brother or my brother's son or whatever to come and set it up for me and so that really presents an opportunity for us to consider having a conversation that is intergenerational and is cross-border. And that the premise of this conversation is supposed to be the Republic of Kenya. So that when tomorrow President William Ruto is not president and whoever comes into office will be able to have a foundation that is not set on shaky ground, a foundation that is very strong, effectively cemented by all the generations of Kenya, including even for the Gen Alphas and the several other generations that are going to come back. Not, of course, forgetting the fact that this generation is a generation that has benefited from a number of mispromises of this government and the previous government, where President William Ruto was actually deputy president. And they're asking themselves, if we could not believe you even for the stadia that you promised us, if we couldn't believe you even for the laptops that you promised us when you were joining our primary or those stages of education, how can we trust you to be able to deliver right now? So it therefore means that there is going to be a lot of checks and balances for government and even those who are in government, including the opposition. A lot of transparency, even the push for those who are in the opposition to be able to do their work of putting the government on check and everyone holding the government to account.
All right, and the live pictures are coming to you live from Karatina in the county of Nyeri, where Kamau Mwangi and Fantas are standing by to give you the live pictures as you are seeing on your screens at the moment on a Tuesday when the Gen Zs have called for countrywide demonstrations. And what they say is a demand to the government for more reforms, including an end to corruption, injustice and inequality, despite major concessions that the government had made in the aftermath of the protests following the passage of the Finance Bill 2024, now withdrawn following the brief takeover of Parliament by protesters on the 25th of June 2024. And this has happened across the counties of Mombasa, where Francis Mtalaki since morning has been giving us an update of the situation. In Kisumu County, Laura Otieno has been doing the same, keeping an eye on what's happening in counties number 042, and also here in Nairobi City County, where our reporter Emmanuel Toh has been with his camera person Isintan as well, Meleta Oletenges, who has been in Kitengela, and also the other team that is in the county of Nakuru, Marianne Nyambura and Evans Asiba. This is the split pictures live coming to you from Karatina, Nyeri County and Nairobi Central Business District and Nakuru now, where our team is keeping an eye on the engagement between the police and the protesters who are decrying what they term as government excesses. And the administration of President William Ruto ever since met with the demonstrations that had denounced the punitive tax proposals, made concessions including withdrawing the finance bill, scrapping the state funding for the office of the First Lady and the Second Lady, coming to the Express for 2 hours to engage the young Kenyans on what they want to be fixed with regards to the governance problems, and also disbanded his entire cabinet last week on Thursday. And on Sunday, during a church service in Nyandarua County, said that the broad-based coalition talks in the hinting at the formation of the government of national unity will be taking place soon, saying that he will come up with people who will help him deliver on his manifesto. And now the talks as planned never kicked off, and there was no communication regarding where the talks were to happen, what would be the agenda. This amid opposition from the youthful demonstrators who have said that they will not be part of that. It also caused a split in the opposition opposition, where some parties have taken a position not to attend the dialogue talks or even take part in the formation of a government of national unity, and that includes Na Kenya of Martha Karua, the Jubilee Party, and as well as the split in the other parties of the opposition on whether to attend the talks that the president called for and help in the formation of a government of national unity. The head of state's yesterday visit to Nakuru County during a development tour also saw a resurgence of members of parliament from the ruling Kenya Kwanza coalition who were forced to lie low in the aftermath of their voting pattern at the National Assembly and the shocking institutional failure by parliament as part of the reasons that led to the youthful demonstrators taking to the streets across the country. And we are giving you the coverage live from the different counties. And now what's on your screen is the live pictures coming to you from Karatina in Nyeri County and the Central Business District in Nakuru County, number 32, where Marian Nyambura and Evans Asiba are keeping an eye as police keep patrol and keep at bay the demonstrators who have been engaging them since morning across the county of Nakuru. And we'll be giving you the live coverage here on Citizen Television. With me in the studio is Kevin Osido from the County Governance Watch to give us his account of what's happening in the country. Kevin, then talking about the degree with which these protests have happened and now the call for the same across the counties, and this is where equal red flags were raised by the Auditor General and the control of budget as to the excesses from the governors and also the lacking oversight on the part of the members of the County Assembly. In essence, a stark contrast of why we have devolved resources and power from the center, which is to bring them in close proximity to the people, but failure on the part of oversight and failure on the part of the executive across the counties in embezzlement of funding, malfeasance that continues to date, no accountability, globetrotting by members of the county assemblies, yet you have people who you ought to be serving, but they are not getting the services that they deserve as a right. Can this again force changes across the counties as we have witnessed across the nation?
This is already causing changes. In fact, the issue of withdrawal of finance bills, quote unquote, has not just happened at the national level. We have also seen counties like Makueni withdrawing its bill. We have seen a robust engagement in Kiambu County, where I'm just coming from, really with citizens and people asking very critical questions around taxation, around issues concerning on-source revenue, the targeting of counties. We are seeing people in Migori asking very critical questions. In Homa Bay, where probably we thought is the county number one, the newest kid in the block with Mheshimiwa Gladys Wanga, and people are raising issues. You go to Siaya County, where I come from, and people are raising concerns around promises that have been made, white elephant programs that were begun by the former government, like the Siaya County Stadium, and of course with hefty appropriations of budgets to the same project with the never-ending, pictures at the tail end of the tunnel. And so citizens are asking critical questions, even at the county levels. How these issues are going to be responded to is purely around taking public participation and the voices of citizens as an important indicator for governance in our country. And failure to do that, we will continue to see people demonstrating every single day. And the beauty of this is that the Gen Zs have told us it is leaderless, it is tribeless, it is, in fact, it is fearless, and that their tools of trade is just knowledge and information. And if you even juxtapose some of the issues to the real documents of governance or budgets, for example, or executive summaries of governance in the counties, they are speaking the truth in a number of them. Of course, taking note of some mis and disinformation in some of the areas, but I would say 98% of the issues that are being raised, including around corruption, are pure facts. And how, therefore, to deal with these issues at that particular, at the county levels, is to engage with the citizens. And why this is happening, Abdikadir, is because citizens, their interest is service delivery. If you tell us that we are going to walk into hospitals and the budget says that we are going to get a doctor at the facility, let it be so. If you say we are going to put up a road and that it is going to be tarmacked, don't do a Amaram road at the cost of the tarmac road, and then you tell us you've already constructed a road.
And at the expense of the taxpayer.
And at the expense of the taxpayer. And how that is also even making it much more worse is because the taxes are also hefty. And even at the county levels, counties are also increasing some of their taxations. For example, parking fees across the county says from one county to another. We are seeing, you know, those are levies that are being increased every single day. We have reviews of the finance budgets. Or rather of the finance bill. So citizens are saying we are informed, we are aware, and the beauty of this is, of course, open governments, where, for instance, we say that counties now, almost all of them we have assessed, they have accessible websites, and they are loading documents there which you can download and actually read and verify. We have advised counties to also put this information in a reader-friendly version, where citizens don't have to engage with the 400-page documents of CIDPs. Allow the chief officers in the sectors to break down priority areas, critical aspects of their sectors, and then you put it in your website so that people can easily engage through their phones and or even in their spaces. You are in traffic jam somewhere and you are interested in looking at what's happening in your county, and you open it up. At County Governance Watch, we have also seen increased interest of people asking for information, where we get calls and someone says, please, can you send me a copy of that finance budget? The one that I have is not what I think they're discussing, or when I check, it's probably different. And that really means that people are now getting much more interested in the governance processes. And that therefore means that even for the people the public servants and state officers, that interest also needs to be paid back in terms of looking at how you engage with the citizens and even answer to some of those questions. I was quite impressed when, for instance, we wrote a letter to Nairobi County over the status of roads within major estates. And the CEC of roads, Bwana Brian Mulam, actually called the office and he said, we have received your letter, but what do you think we need to do? Because we have limited budgets. You also note that Nairobi is a capital city and we have a lot of vehicles that crisscross, and we are seemingly not having, even in our own source revenue, a lot of the monies are being channeled to other sectors. And despite, of course, having questions in terms of how some of the aspects of the sectors of the budget of Nairobi have also been budgeted for or appropriated, the fact that you give feedback is already good enough so that people don't assume that, we sent a letter and there is nothing being done. And slowly by slowly, based on the conversations that we read, and also with Kura, the conversations that we had with the county government and also with some of the agencies, we are seeing repairs being done across the various estates. We are seeing repairs, at least there is some work now being done to be able to exert some response based on the questions that citizens are raising. And that is what the people are saying across the counties of the Republic of Kenya.
And if then that, because the anticipation was that in our current dispensation, that ought to have been the natural undertakings that those in policy positions ought to have taken. But that hasn't happened, and it took coming to the streets and prompting the government to make some policy decisions also in the previous administrations, the moving to court, demanding for more accountability, the rule of law and good governance generally. But how then can the citizenry at the devolved level be able to make these moves with regards to holding those, for instance, at the county assembly level to account? Because there seems to be a gross failure in oversight from the counties, where governors conduct their businesses willy-nilly, knowing that they are able to manage their affairs at the county level. Does it need as much exposure and as much concentration from the demonstrating Kenyan youth that also this should be the situation across the counties?
And that time is coming. The MCAs are also going to be greeted. Watasalimiwa. The pressure is going to also increase. We're saying that as the pressure increases or decreases, and it increases, that pressure is also going to increase at the county assembly level. Because as we said earlier on, the citizens expect that their elected representatives are going to be the people to become their first role of call to be able to address their issues. And the county assemblies really have a very important, if not critical, role to play in governance and the running of county governments, right from the legislative process. We have not seen the county assemblies helping the executive to put in place effective rules or legislations that are supporting a lot of what the governors promise and then get into the CIDPs. For instance, in most of the counties, you go there and they talk to you about OSR, on source revenue, really, which is a very good practice, is a good mechanism. And you expect that through that money, the counties will not be over-dependent on the exchequer, and sit there waiting for monies that are coming from the national government. But you talk to most of the counties, the county assemblies have failed to support the treasuries to put in place laws or acts that support on-source revenue. And so you look at a majority of the streams, let's call it maybe liquor, the wines and the liquor as a stream, or even entertainment. A lot of the things that happen are based on hulabaloo's. They are miragic. They are not based on any either research or on any evaluation that has been properly done. On land rates, for example, most governors have decried the fact that the acts or the laws that are being used currently are actually laws that were done in the first generation of county governments, probably in 2016. And today we are doing 8 years overboard. It means that even the inability of the county assemblies to progressively pass these laws is denting the projections of county governments insofar as on-source revenue is concerned. Hence the reason why in a number of counties right now, the citizens are up in arms over taxation on land rates, because you want to build them on rates that are present, but the research that you have or the baseline that you have is 8 years down the line. Okay. It means that there's a lot of investment that needs to be put in terms of building the capacity, because we also know that in most of our county assemblies, the capacities of a number of the members is also quite wanting, and is also almost similar to what you were talking about, the national level.
Assembly level.
Yeah, precisely.
It still comes down to the choice, is it?
It still goes back to who we elect, who we put in office, and it's because the people that we are electing are not angels. They're not alien to us. We know them, we know where they come from, we probably even know their education levels, despite some of them lying to us in terms of whether they have a degree, they are degree holders or not. But there are people that we know. Why? Because, Abdikadir, everyone on the streets demonstrating comes from a village that is domiciled in a ward,
yes,
that is in a sub-county or in a constituency, that is in a specific county. So it is therefore important that we get to know how we relate to the people that represent us at these levels, and even how we elect them. And so once we have already elected them, we expect that when they get to the county assemblies or in Parliament, National Assembly and the Senate, they are going to exercise that progressive role of putting in place proper laws or legislations, of exercising their oversight roles in asking the difficult questions. In some of the counties, we have also seen where speakers are facing impeachments. And it's because they have refused to go into beds with some of the negative aspects that the members of counties are asking for. And so how will the citizens also protect the speakers who are under siege, or speakers who are facing threats based on some of the excesses of members? And so it is important that the citizens, those who are on the streets and those who are listening to us, and every Kenyan citizen, also identify with a specific sector. When public participation on water is called, please show up, present your views, and follow through that process to the extent that if they fail to take up a proposal which the citizens really liked and rallied for, then you raise questions. And hence the reason why people go to court. And you mentioned the court as a mode of last resort. When you feel aggrieved, go to court. And we have seen again the judiciary and some of our judicial officers being very, very bold to stop even some of the excesses of government. Yeah. And that really is the core and the reason as to why we are learning a lot of lessons from some of these protests that are taking place.
And looking at that, and brief look at also generally the conduct of how the political establishment normally operates, and given what we witnessed in the case of the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, when the court said this is no ordinary amendment to the Constitution, but a dismemberment, according to the President of the Court of Appeal then. And also generally that you can't bypass this Katiba without consequences.
Right.
Whilst this seems to be a general conduct amongst the political class, is the lack of appetite for good governance and constitutionalism the reason as to why then certainly we are taking this direction of both the national and county administrations coming under intense pressure given the protests that youthful Kenyans have organized and are at the moment ongoing across the country?
And is because of impunity. When you sit in an office and you're expected to undertake certain roles and responsibilities, and you have a law like the Constitution of Kenya and its supportive legislations, and you decide to do the opposite of what that law is expecting you to do, or of what the citizens expect you to do. What really comes to your mind? What is this motivation, or what is it that you are thinking about? And it really is what is giving the youthful Kenyans who are now on the streets, and all the Kenyans who are asking questions, that impetus, the courage and the energy to be able now to demand for better within and from government. And it's therefore a call for those who are in government offices that when you have a responsibility, don't wait to go to court. When you're a governor, and even before you get to the level of being impeached, there are pre-impeachment processes. There must have been queries that have been raised by members, by the public. How do you respond to those queries? There must have been a feedback mechanism, which is not what we see in our governance processes, Abdikadir, and it's because people fear even sitting with the electorate. They fear sitting with their citizens, and we see this in almost all the counties, where you request a governor or a deputy or a CEC or a chief officer to come and grace over a function, and they give you a call and you sit there for 4 hours, giving them point by point what you want them to come and say. They ask you for draft speech, then they again ask you for, talking notes, then they tell you, now translate this into a proper speech of not more than 20 minutes. Why would an outsider want to do a speech for the governor? Why would an outsider want to do a speech for the CEC? The relationship between the leaders and those that they're leading is not very good in this country. And it really surprises a number of us as to why that is happening, because all of them are Kenyans. When you are being voted, you are voted from a pool of Kenyan citizens, and that is what the law says, and a stranger cannot come and get voted here. You must be a citizen. And so it therefore means that you have a clear understanding of the happenings. What goes on in the mind of a leader who suddenly changes, the expectations of the people, and even how you relate to people. That before you are voted, you are very good with people, you conduct door to door, you go to a common church where everybody knows you, you have a common number which they can call, and you receive and you talk to them. Suddenly you get into office and you move your residence, you move away from that community, you move your phone number, you change it, and you become very difficult to find. Then you have an array of advisors and personal assistants who also have advisors and personal assistants who therefore make it so difficult for citizens to engage. And that is purely the reason why we are where we are. I was really troubled last week when I went into one of these institutions, and they were expecting a principal secretary to show up and grace this event. And so a whole GK van shows up with a whole lot of people who call themselves advisors and personal assistants, and then as they introduce themselves, I am the PA to the advisor, then this one says I'm the PA to the advisor, and I'm like, what is this? So I asked them, but must it be like this? So I was very impressed when Gen Z said, even for your advisors, you have so many people who are just crisscrossing on the corridors doing nothing. Yeah. We want that trail to get back to how really government is being managed because of issues of public wage bill and precisely the efficiency and effectiveness of government. So all this that is happening is positive to the extent that they are opening up government. Citizens are exercising their sovereignty, and indeed that there are lessons that we are learning in terms of how to make government effective and efficient, and much more fundamentally respond to the queries that have been raised by citizens.
Thank you, Kevin. You're watching the live pictures from Nairobi Central Business District, where events are at the moment unfolding. Let's listen.